every game developer needs to be using version control. In this tutorial, I will show you how to set up a remote repository on an AWS hosted EC2 instance for the version control system of Perforce. And we're going to be using this in context of a Unity project. So that's a lot of keywords. Don't worry, I'm going to break it all down for you. This guide is split into parts, so if you go to the bottom of the video, you can scroll along the timeline, jump to different parts, and that's only because some of these sections you may already know all the information for. So first, I just want to go over what is Perforce and what is version control, and if you already know that, feel free to jump ahead as we start the EC2 instance. So what is version control? Version control is basically a system of controlling what version of different project files we are currently working on. So the way that that works is at any given time you're working on the project and your game project, let's say, has a local version. That's the version that you're working on. And if you weren't using version control, that's the only version that would exist. When you save a file, it saves to your computer. The difference with version control is you have a separate version. And this separate version is called your depot, and it's considered part of a repository. So a repository is basically where we have those changes. The depot is the remote version, and the workspace is sort of the client version. So the terminology there may not be 100% accurate, but that's how I like to think about it. So the depot is sort of like a mirror of your local version. So if you make a change locally, let's say you add a new line to a text file, you can send it to the depot, and then now that new line of the text file will be reflected in that version. Now, if my friend wants to sync changes, he can get the file from the depot, and he'll see that now his local version has the new line that I added. So that's the general idea behind version control. The main purpose, I would say, is so that you can have multiple users contributing to the same shared code base. But personally, I'm usually coding on my own, and the reason why I use it is for safety. So if anything were to happen to my local machine, or I were to break something in a way that I wanted to roll back changes, it's sort of like a checkpoint system in a video game or a save system, right? You can load your old save state and go back in case you wanted to undo a change, or you want to test something out and you want to maybe do safety in case your computer crashes. You don't want to lose all your data. These are some of the reasons that I use version control. So when it comes to version control, there are several different types, and they're not similar. Something like Git, which you may have heard of, very popular from this website called the GitHub, where many people can publish publicly visible versions of their repository. Well, there's something like that called Git. There's another thing that we're going to talk about today called Perforce. And these are really very different ways of thinking about version control. Git is very liberal, very open, very free. And Perforce is very controlled, is very draconian. It's very conservative in that sense. And Perforce is a much better fit for game development for two main reasons. The first is when it comes to this control aspect, Perforce allows you to lock down a file. And it's very important to be able to do that because in game development, unlike, say, web development, we often have these very large files where they are binary files. And so a binary file is not human readable, okay? If you were to open it up, it wouldn't be like a text document. It'd be just a bunch of random letters and numbers. And so you wouldn't be able to interpret what changes were made between one version and another, other than seeing this random sequence of numbers and letters being different. And that can be a problem because if someone makes a change and someone else makes a change, then if you get two of those changes at once, which happens frequently, it's called a merge conflict, where you have these two different versions and you want to take changes from both ideally. Well, when it's binary, you can't tell what changes are made. So you really have only the option to take one version or the other wholesale. And all changes that were made of the version you're not going to take, well, those changes are removed. They're deleted. They're lost. And that's not good. So when we can, like in a text document, if someone changed the spelling of a word in paragraph 1 and someone changed the spelling of a word in paragraph 2, Well, when you resolve those, you can see, oh, okay, this guy changed paragraph 1, this guy changed paragraph 2, no big deal, merge them, okay? And I mean, code is just a text document. So when it's just code, as is often the case in something like web development, that's easy to do, and that's why people love Git. But when it comes to these binary files, you can't do that. So instead what we do is we will lock down binary files. So if someone's saying, hey, I'm going to edit this file, they'll lock it. And when they lock it, no one else can edit that file, which prevents them from making a change that we would have to delete. So that's basically the idea behind this sort of control-oriented version control. That's the flavor that we're talking about today. That's what Perforce is all about, because Git doesn't provide that support. The second reason why you'd want to go with Perforce versus something like Git is because Git doesn't support large files anyway. You'd have to use this additional add-on called Git LFS. And I used that for years before transitioning to Perforce. But it comes with some issues, and it seems that every sort of Git provider I worked with had LFS as an additional charge. And so it wound up being too expensive, basically, for me to use this Git LFS version. And really, you're kind of swimming against the stream here, because a Git was not designed for game development, whereas Perforce was designed specifically for these sort of large file use cases. So that's why I'm going to be showing you Perforce today, and that's why I recommend it. It's the industry standard. Is it the best? Yes, it's the best that we have available, but I don't think it's that great. I don't love Perforce at all, really. I think its UI is definitely shit at times, and we'll talk about that a bit as well. But I think Perforce is probably the best bet for most game developers, particularly those that are working on 3D games, where we're working with larger assets. So in this tutorial, we're talking about EC2, which is, I forget what it stands for, but it's an Amazon-provided service that allows us to kind of host a server in the cloud, and that server is going to be the server for our Perforce repository. So it's going to manage the depot. Just like I said before, when we're dealing with version control, we have a local version and we have a depot. If you wanted, you could actually have your depot on your local machine. Okay, a depot is just like a normal computer, basically, and you could save the files to your local machine. But then, of course, if your local machine dies, your depot dies. So I don't think that's the best plan. It'd be better if it's remote, which is what I'm going to show you. If you ever heard of like a server, like sometimes companies will have a server room with just a bunch of racks of computers. Those are just computers that are running, servers like this, and that's essentially what Amazon is doing. So it's just another computer. That's all we're doing. It's just another computer that we can remote into in order to set it up. But there's nothing special here. And if you have an old computer laying around that you don't mind having on the entire day, then you could just do it on one of your own machines. You don't necessarily have to use Amazon. And of course, most, well, maybe not most, but a lot of game companies will have their own servers. So without further ado, let's jump into it. And I'm going to share my screen here to show you the AWS Management Console. So the website here. Let me see if I can pull that down and show you the website. The website is aws.amazon.com/console. All right, I guess I can't fit that in the screen. Maybe I'll just move this like this. Yeah, aws.amazon.com/console. That's where we are today. And what you need to do is create an account. So follow, I guess, all the prompts that are required for creating an account. I haven't done that recently, so I'm not sure how that works. But I think you actually have to get approved, and it might take up to maybe a business day or two in order for you to get approved as an AWS customer. And you will need to put down, I think, a credit card, even if you're not going to take on any fees. So we're going to talk about a free version. This is going to be a free solution. However, that depends on your repo size. If your repo grows and you have a lot of game projects or a very large game project on the repository, well, then you will get charged fees. So Amazon fees are pretty reasonable, but they can stack up. So currently I'm paying $10 a month. So it's about $120 a year for the services that I'm using. But there, like I said, there's a free tier. So if your game project in total is under, not including the libraries, if the total size is under 30 gigabytes, which it very reasonably may be, then you're not going to have to pay anything. So we'll talk about that in a bit. So first what you do is you log in. Okay, and I am using an account called blackveinproductions@gmail.com. Type in my password and sign in. Okay, great. And Amazon services is a little overwhelming. They have so many things that they do. What we want though is called EC2. So we'll just search that here, EC2. Okay, and it's the very first one right there, so we just click that. Okay, and EC2 is basically just a way to run multiple computers, which are called instances. So what you want to do is click Launch Instance, and now we can design this thing a little bit. Oh, I should say that before we launch an instance, what you're going to want to do is just make sure that you're in the right region. So up here, there are different regions in the world, and this is kind of deciding where your where your program is going to be hosted. Where is your server going to be? Amazon maintains these huge server locations in different places in the world, and you want to choose one that's as central to your developers as possible to limit the amount of time it takes for your computer signals to go all the way there and back. So I'm on the East Coast, so something that would be US East of Ohio or North Virginia would be good. But today we're going to be using US East Ohio. And yeah, what you want to do is you want to push launch an instance, which is the same button we were showing earlier, but now it's in a different spot. So you push launch instance, and then you're going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this instance, let's see what we've got here. I'll call it demo _ example. And we're going to be using a Amazon Linux instance. Linux is a headless machine, and I think for that reason, it's probably one of the most lightweight options. So you click that, and then you can go through all their different Linux options. The one we'll be using is called Amazon Linux 2023. Okay. We're going to go with a 64-bit architecture for no reason in particular. The instance type, I'm going to go with the T2 micro. So what this does is it basically controls how powerful the machine is, like how much memory and CPU it has. So if you choose a stronger machine, it can complete all your operations much faster. But for my use case as a simple team with only 1 or 2 contributors at a time, T2 micro is just fine. Now what we need to do is we need to create a key pair. So this is sort of like a password for your repository. So click create a new key pair and then just give it a name. So we'll call this demo _ test, and it's going to be a .pem file, which is basically the extension they use for their key pairs. So click create key pair, and then save this somewhere on your computer. So I'll put it in my downloads folder for now. Okay, now you need a security group. So I'm going to be using an existing security group called P4V, or there's also, I believe, a default one. Security group is probably the thing I know the least amount, but what this essentially allows you to do is control which IP addresses have access to your repository. It may be the case that you only want to let your IP address access it, or if you have a known number of team members, you can kind of just add theirs independently, or you can just rely on the key itself, and so then you wouldn't need to worry about the IP address. You could just have it, any IP is accessible. The one that I've set up here is basically any, here, I'll click this. Let me see where okay, so I'm going to go up here. I'm going to type in security groups just so that I could show you how I've set up my security groups in case you need to do that. So here it is. I'm going to click on this one that I'm going to use called P4V. It's just a simple one. I followed a YouTube tutorial to set this up. But here it is basically. You can see that I have inbound rules, and I'm not sure really how much of these are necessary, but I'm accepting on the port range 1666, which I believe is the default port. And the source, it just says ::/0 or 0.0.0.0/0, which, as I understand it, basically means anyone can connect. I think that's what this is saying. If it's : :/0, it's saying anybody can connect to our system. And then the outbound rules are 0.0.0.0/0. So I think what that also means is any traffic can go out. So I'm not a network specialist, so maybe double check that, but that's how I've set it up, and that's working very well for me. So let's get back to business. So what we were doing is we were launching an instance, and I just wanted to explain the security group. So we've set all this up. We're going to go with test underscore demo, and we're doing T2 micro, and the key pair is called demo underscore test, and we're going to go with that security group, P4V. I think if you create a security group, then by default, look, it's going to say go from anywhere as well. So that's, I guess, with that 0, oh dear. Hold on, my computer just lagged for some reason. If you do 0.0.0, you can see it says anywhere. So that's just as well basically what I'm doing with P4V. And then here we set the size. So type in a number here, and then it's going to spaz out and expand. And then what you want to do is you want to type in 30. Just because 30 is basically the total amount of storage you can get for the free tier. And I don't want you to have to pay any money unless you have to. All right, my alarm's going off. So there you go. You set it up, 30 gigabytes, and we're ready to go. So push launch instance. And now click over here to go to your instances tab. That's on the top right, or top left there, excuse me. And it's going to say pending. Okay, so I have my other instances already running, and this one is pending. So you're going to need to wait a little bit. I think it might take like about an hour for it to get set up. And then you can come back and we're going to continue. Oh, wow. Never mind. It's ready. In the past, it's taken me like an hour, but I guess maybe traffic is low right now. So, hey, let's just keep going then. So when it says it's running, what you're going to want to do now is access the depot. So there are 2 ways to do it. The first way is to just click on it, then click connect up here. And you could actually click this button right here, EC2 Instance Connect, and then push connect. And if you push connect, you will connect, hopefully. It says establishing connection right now, and boom, we see this little bird. And my computer's lagging out for some reason. Hold on, let me pause and fix that. All right, I think one of my display cables was loose. I punched it a little bit, and hopefully that helps. So anyways, here we are. We see the beautiful bird, and we're smiling. So this is we are remotely controlling the Linux instance. So that's one way to do it. I want to show you another way, though, which is to connect using the key that we got. So I'm going to close this connection. And I'm going to show you this SSH option. So I would recommend you use the EC2 instance. That is easier. Here we're going to go on a little side quest, and I'm going to show you how to use that key you downloaded. Okay, let me set that up for us. Okay, cool. So let's hope this works. On the right-hand side of my computer here, you'll see that I have my downloads folder where I have the demo test, PEM, right? Remember, that's the key pair file that we downloaded. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click SSH client on the left, and it's going to give me a suggestion of how to do it, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to control right-click in my folder here. Oh, that didn't work, sorry. Control shift-click. That's what it is. It's shift right-click to open PowerShell here. And the reason why I want to open it specifically in this folder is because this is the folder that contains the demo test.pem. You could, of course, move the demo test, or when you reference it here, you can add to the path. So you can add the full path. So for example, if I knew it was, well, this is in the downloads folder, so that's a little wacky. I don't know what the full path is. But if you wanted to, for example, come all the way over here, and you wanted to do like C:/ blah, 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 /, right? And specify the exact path, then it wouldn't matter where we start it from. But since I'm starting it from the downloads thing, I can use the example exactly as it's written. And this should work. I'm going to push enter. Let's see. Enter. All right, so it's saying, hey, we don't trust this site. Do you trust them? I'm going to say, yes, I do. All right, and now you can see we've reached the bird again. So this is just another way to connect to the instance. This way is using your client, and the other way is using the web interface that they have. Either way, jump on in, and what we're going to do when we get here is we're going to set up the EC2 instance as a Perforce repository, okay, as our server, actually. So this is called a Helix server. That's what Perforce calls them. And what we're going to need to do for this step is we're going to need to download and install Perforce onto this machine. Now, it's not the same Perforce that we use as a user, right, as a client. It's a different version of Perforce. And I have that version here. Okay, and it's called the helix-core-server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the description of this video. Okay, but here, I'll just go to this website manually. Let's put it right here. Copy, paste. Oh, well, forget the wget part. You don't want to have that part. So if I were to go here, you're going to see it's just going to instantly try to download the helix-core-server.tgz. And if I change the path up a little bit, I'm going to remove the very last section after that slash. You'll see that this is basically just an online hosted like series of files. And this is where they get, this is basically where you're downloading Perforce from. So what we're doing is we're saying to our machine here, download Perforce from this URL. Okay, that's what the wget command does. So we're going to push enter. And the download is now complete. That was very fast. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check it out. So in Linux, you push ls, and you can see all the files that are currently in your directory. So right now we've got one. It's called helix-core-server.tgz. And that's sort of like a zip file. What we need to do is extract that file. So we have another command here. Okay. This one's called tar space zxvf. You're probably thinking that is very illegible, and it is. But that is basically how we're going to unzip this file. So you type that in, because in Linux world, everything is spelled a little wacky. And there we go. So we're done. So now we're going to push ls again, and you'll see that now we don't have one file. Now we have several files. We have the zipped file, and we have a bunch of other stuff, including these executables, which are, I think, drawn in green. So what you want to do now is just run the p4d executable. So to do that, we push, and this is how you do it in Linux, you push /p4d. Okay, and we're done. So what it did was it did print out a warning, okay, with respect to the db.topology. I have no idea what that means. But it said Perforce server is starting. And that's it. That's all we needed to do. So now the Perforce server is up and running. And we can actually push X right here. We can close out the instance. There's no more work that we need to do in order to set up the system. It's done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set up our client. So what we're going to need is the P4 admin software. So download this from your computer or from the internet. It's called P4 admin. And it's, yes. Okay, so P4 admin, let's talk about that. P4 admin, that should be easy enough to download from the website. Is it the first Google result? I think it is. Yeah, here it is, boom. P4 admin. And for this one, you're downloading it for whatever machine you're using. If you're using a Mac, then it's Mac. If it's Windows, then it's Windows. We don't need Linux anymore, unless I guess you're developing on a Linux machine for some reason, but probably Windows. And now what we're going to do, once we have the program running, is we're going to say open a new connection. Okay, cool. And so in this connection, what you're going to do is you are going to specify the full server, the full server address. So that was here. It's actually this section right here. So this whole section that we pasted in previously to SSH, we're going to want that. However, we're going to remove the first part and we're going to add a new second part. Okay, we're going to remove the prefix. We're going to add a suffix. So this whole EC2-user at, we don't want that. We want everything after it. So all the way from EC2- all the way up to .com. So copy that. That is going to be our server. And then, oh, can I not control? There we go. And then we're going to add a :1666 666, of course, being the number of the beast. You need to summon the devil to make it work. No, I think that's just because 166 is the default port. So that's what we're going to do here. So you type in the server name and then you do :1666. And now you're going to need to create a user. So you push new and you create a user. So my user will be called Bobby.Joe. Okay. And then you type in your full username or your full name. Sorry, Bobby Joe. And then you could type in your password and your email. Okay. I think you might need the email. Let's see. Yeah, I think you need the email. So my email will be bobby.joe@gmail.com. Okay. And yeah, there we go. So then we push OK. And something popped up. I don't know what the hell that was. Oh, here we go. It says, if you proceed, you will become the sole user with super user access. And you'll need to grant other users access. Do you want to proceed? So I say, yes, I do. And now that's done. So we're done with P4 admin. There's only one step left, which is to set up our workspace. So what this has done is it's basically, I think, established the connection. And now what we need to do is we need to set up a repository. So I'm going to do it right on my in my downloads folder. And we're going to call this the Bobby Joe repo. Bobby Joe repo. All right, cool. So you set that up. And now what you want to do is access the Perforce visual client. So this is called P4V. And we don't want to increase the font size. We want to just type in P4V and click this right here. Download Helix Visual Client P4V. And again, you specify your family, blah, 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 blah. And you download it. And then you're going to run it. And it's going to look like this. Okay. So actually, it's not going to look like that. It's going to look like this. All right. So when we get here, again, we're going to type in the server right here. So just copy that from the website again. Control paste. Now our user is going to be, of course, Bobby Joe, which we just created. And then our workspace is going to be where are all of our files stored, right? What's the local version? So this would be your Unity folder or something like that. But in my case, I am doing the Bobby Joe repo, of course. So I'm going to say create a new workspace called bobby.joe_repo. Why not? And the workspace root will be in my downloads right here, Bobby Joe repo. Okay, I select that folder. I push OK. Push OK. And there's an add files wizard, which I'm going to skip. Cancel, yes. And boom, we're done. The repo set up. Ta-da! Awesome. So now what you want to do is you can start adding files and you can, Perforce will work. So we'll talk about the P4 ignore in just a moment, but let's try this. So if I add in a text document and it's going to be called r-info, then I go to P4V, I right click, I do reconcile offline work. It will detect that I've added in a new file called r-info. And then what I can do is I can have this automatically added to my default change list and submit it. So I'll say initial commit, and then I'm going to push submit. All right. And so that is, so now I have no pending changes, but if I go to view my history, or I should say view submitted changes, I can see that I previously did this commit just like that. All right. And let's say that I want to, let's say I edit that file. So let me go and edit that file a little bit. Just to show you some of the stuff we're doing here. So I'm going to add in this text. I'm going to push save. I'm going to overwrite it. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Reconcile offline work, go to pending, submit it again. I'm going to call this change adding garbage text, push submit. Now if I go to my submitted page, you'll see there's a new one here, and I can push Control D to view that version, and you could see that on the left-hand side is what it was blank, and on the right-hand side is what it is now. It has the garbage text. So that's a way that you can kind of view any of the changes. You could also undo the changes. So if I right-click here, and I say undo the changes of change list 2, save this as a new change list, Then I've got some changes here. Let's see, what did I do? I'll do Control D on this. It's taken the garbage text and it's sent it back to empty. Okay, so that's a way that you can undo your changes if you want to roll back. So I'll submit that. And now when I open up this file, it's going to say, hey, it's changed. Do you want to reload it? I'll say yes, reload it. And now you'll see it's empty once again. So that is, that's a crash course on how Perforce works. But there is something I want to talk to you about, which is kind of important before you start syncing anything. And that is P4 ignore. Okay, P4 ignore is very, very important because it allows us to not submit certain changes. Okay, and that's important because when we have a Unity project, Unity creates a lot of garbage. Well, not garbage, I shouldn't say that. That's kind of rude. It creates a lot of temporary data that is not necessary to sync because if it goes to another person, they can generate that temporary data all on their own. They don't need us to sync changes to the temporary data. So what we need to do is we need to ignore that folder. And particularly with Unity, there's this folder called library. You never want to sync that folder. Okay, so what I recommend you do, well, we gotta make a P4 ignore. So what you need to do is you need to go to your command prompt. So I'll type in CMD here. And what you want to do is you want to type in P4 space set. Okay, and this is going to tell you all the environment variables that are related to Perforce. Or at least I believe that's what this is doing. And one of those that we want is this one, P4 ignore. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify a ignore file. And in our case, we're actually just going to specify an extension so that no matter where that ignore file is within the repo, it will apply to that section. So the way to do that, I believe, is going to be P4 set, and then you type this in, P4 ignore in all capitals equals dot P4 ignore, now in all lowercase. So what this is saying is set the P4 ignore environment variable to be equal to dot P4 ignore, that extension. Okay, and now if we do P4 set, I mean, it already was that for me, but now you'll see that it is that again. Fantastic. So that is our P4 ignore, which means it's going to start looking for those files whenever it checks for changes. And now we need to add one. So to add a P4 ignore, it's basically just adding a file that has that extension. So let me do that for us. So what we would do now is we'd create a new file. So I guess you'd create a text document. Okay. This is the fastest way I know how to do it. And then do file save as, but save it not as a .txt, save it as a .p4 ignore. So you'd save this as .p4 ignore, and I'm not even going to give it a name. It's just going to be .p4 ignore. Save. And now anything we type into this is going to be our P4 ignore file. So to show a little example of that, let's add a new folder here. I'm going to call this folder, we'll call it library, since that is kind of how Unity does it. And then I'm going to add some stuff in here that we don't want to sync. So this is a live demo, and I don't know this stuff too well, so hopefully I don't mess it up. But I'm going to add in some folders in here. Let's do some fruits. So let's do strawberry. Let's do strawberry, and oh, we don't need another folder. Let's just do another thing here called banana. Banana. And maybe another one called kiwi. Okay, cool. So we don't want to sync those files. So we're gonna, in the P4 ignore, what we want to specify is don't sync the library folder. So I'm just gonna rename this. Oh, sorry. And I'm gonna copy the name here to be library. And I think another way you could do it is you can manually specify the full path like this. But of course, if somebody else has it located in a different area, that's not going to work. So instead, if you just do library, I think that's going to prevent anything that is within the library folder. So you set it up like that. And now let's see what happens. So now we're going to reconcile offline work. Reconcile. And interestingly, it did not grab any of those text documents. So normally I think you actually have to submit the P4 ignore before it starts working. But I I guess not. I guess I just needed to have it like that. Oh, and then we created the new text document. I don't want that one, so I'm going to revert it to delete it. That was just for setting up the P4 ignore. And let me submit this. So I'll submit P4 ignore. Okay, so that is submitted now. And these guys, so if I reconcile offline work, I guess they're not going to come. Yeah, so it says no files need to be reconciled. So I guess it is already ignoring them. You'll see though so this says apply P4 ignore. So this is saying like consider P4 ignore so that we can ignore files. But if you uncheck it, you'll see that all those files come up. Oh, sorry, my alarm went off again. So yeah, so the files will come up, but if we apply P4 ignore, then they won't, which is what we want, right? We don't want the library files in Unity to show up. And if you go on to the Google, let me see, where is that? Go over here and you type in, you know, P4 ignore Unity example, type in something like that. You'll probably on the internet be able to find a good example of like a P4 ignore file. All right, I guess I'm trying to look for it now. I'm not really finding it. You know what I'll do? I'll just give you guys mine. I could just link you mine in the description. Maybe we could find one. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is good. So this is a good one right here, P4 ignore. You can see that he's ignoring the library file, he's ignoring the temp file, the obj file, the build file, right? If you create an executable of the game, anybody could do that. You don't need to have that stored. And I guess for some reason, asset store tools and all this stuff as well. So basically what he's doing here is he's just saying, ignore these folders. And the reason why he's doing a slash library slash is what he's saying is, don't just ignore the directory named library, because what we're doing here is we're ignoring a library because it's kind of at the root level. It's all the way at the top. But if you do the slash like this, I believe what that is doing is it's saying, ignore the library folder even if it's within another folder, which is probably going to be the case for your repo setup. And then the slash here, I believe, is saying, and any folder that is contained within it, I'm not sure. I think you only need the first slash, but I think what he's saying here is no matter where it is in the repo, whether it's in a subfolder or it's in the root, ignore that. So that's what that is saying. And then what he's doing down here is he's saying *.csproj. What he's saying is any file that has the extension csproj, don't track that. Similarly, the solution, don't track that. Any .user files, any .temporary files, that's what he's doing there. Not sure why he's doing svd, because I'm pretty sure that's a image file. So that would be an asset you probably would want to track. You probably would want to track. But things like the CPP file, I guess he's thinking that it can be on a user per user basis. Okay, so that's basically how you do P4 ignores, and that's it. So we've got it all set up. If you ever need to connect back to your EC2 instance, you know how to do that. But in my experience, I haven't had to. Like for years, I just leave it up and it just runs automatically, and then I can sync and push and pull without any issues. So that's the tutorial on how to set yourself up. So hopefully that helps you. If you have questions, then I probably can't help you. So maybe go to Stack Overflow. I think that'd be the best place to ask for some questions, because I'm not an expert at this, but I was just hoping to give you a hand. So good luck out there, and let me know how it goes for you.